it's in like a sealed box, and we don't open it until the day it flies.
I'm assuming that that's right.
We could put the dates inside on the spar, just write them on the spar, you know.
Good evening, everyone. The hour of 6 p.m. having arrived, I will call to order this regular meeting of the Planning Licenses and Development Committee. This meeting is being broadcast live on the City of Keene YouTube channel and channel 1302. The video is also streamed on the city's website and is posted on the website by the end of the next business day, barring any technical difficulties. Copies of the printed agenda are available in the wall pockets as you enter the meeting room. The public and other city councilors will be recognized to ask questions and comment on agenda items under discussion. After being recognized, all remarks are to be made through the chair. I will not recognize an individual a second time until everyone who wishes has had a chance to speak. Anyone who wishes to address the committee is asked to go to one of the microphones in the room and identify themselves by name and address prior to speaking. Written comments from the public will be accepted at the clerk's office until Tuesday at 1 p.m. I will now call to order this regular meeting of the Planning Licenses and Development Committee and declare a quorum present. The minute taker is participating remotely this evening, so committee members, please remember to turn on your microphone or you might hear a reminder. All right, welcome everyone. It's been a while since we've been in this room together. We had given up a meeting for MSFI for the downtown project, and we've also had a summer break. So we're glad to be back in here, and hopefully we can get through these items pretty expeditiously this evening. Our first item is Peter SBF's placement of cell tower in residential neighborhood, a nuisance and safety hazard concern. Do we have Mr. SBF's?
I want to hand this out to the committee so they can get an idea what I'm talking about. I'm here to talk to you about nuisance. Maybe I'm a nuisance, I don't know.
Never.
Anyway, this Tilson Company and U.S. Cellular have moved into the Middle Street, Summer Street area with their tower, this 5G tower. They put it about 25 feet from the Leach Home, which is right on the corner of Middle Street and Summer Street. And we're telling you or asking you to consider whether this is a nuisance because they put it in an arrangement where the city had made some curb cuts and extended the curb out into the middle of Summer Street. And so what we have witnessed over the years is that I've been living there and others, many accidents happen there because of the curb cuts being covered by the snow and in darkness too. They can't see it, and when they get to that narrower portion, they wonder where they are, and some of them drive right up into the curb cut that's there. And now we've got this device there that's powering the 5G tower. And you're saying, well, what difference does that make? Well, the warning sign on the 5G tower tells the story of what we're concerned about, what we're afraid of. And what it says, the warning sign, I've handed this out to you so you can take a look at it. It says hazardous voltage will cause death, serious injury, or substantial property damage. And also it says that further in fine print, turn off the power supplying this equipment before working inside. So if there's a collision out there with this tower and its base, we're going to have all kinds of problems. And the question is, who's gonna turn it off? Are they gonna turn it off in time? How many residents will be affected? And what's the intensity of the catastrophe gonna be? And we'll have all kinds of goings-on that really, I think, bring it up to the point where it's considered a nuisance. And why is it a nuisance? Because we have all the vehicles from the courthouse, the snow plows, the city trucks, everything goes around that bend to get out to Court Street. And some of them come off School Street, down Summer Street, making a cut to get downtown. And they don't see it in the wintertime especially. It's a very hard thing to realize, because if you don't use the street very much, you don't know it. And even if you do use the street, you're not sure where you're going. I don't know what steps the city took in controlling that kind of a situation, but it seems like Tilson and US Cellular were given power to do anything they wanted. And they bought it and put it right there in that spot. There's other places that could be safer. They didn't look for a safe place, they put it right there, and it's only about 25 to 30 feet from the Leach house, Jody Leach's house. So what's Jody Leach gonna do when this thing explodes? It's not funny. So what is a nuisance? Okay. The general law of nuisance is that which annoys and disturbs one in possession of his property, rendering its ordinary use or acceptance physically uncomfortable. Also, everything that endangers life or health gives offense to the senses or vitiates the loss of decency or obstructs reasonable and comfortable use of property. So it's pretty broad, and it's common sense, really. And it's not anything that you're not doing yourselves. In the Code of Development, the City Development Code, Section 17 or Chapter 17, covers several nuisance situations which the city has delineated. And I might call those out for you. I'm trying to find out where I put that.
Can I ask a question before you continue?
Yes.
Yes, Counselor Jones?
I just wanted to ask you where the definition of nuisance came from. Was that the state statute definition?
The statute that I've been reading.
Yes,
No,
I just
this
want to
is-
know where that
this is
definition came
law.
from.
This is case law.
Okay,
Case law that I've read from New Hampshire law. Okay? That's where I got them,
thank you.
yeah.
Can I address
And
the city?
The case law around the country is about the same.
So,
It's not really anything very special.
since this topic has come up, before we move on, I would just like to address our city attorney too. Do we have any definitions in our codes or laws and locally that are similar, or?
Well,
can you
there
address that?
there are a number. What Attorney SBF is citing to is basically the common law definition of nuisance, which is what arises in the case law. And, but there are statutes. There's one in particular, RSA 544 in New Hampshire, which deals with nuisances. They essentially arise in a fairly specific kind of context. You know, basically, I can read it to you. Buildings in which lewdness, assignation, prostitution, or illegal manufacture of drugs occur. So that's one. There's definitions of nuisances with respect to dogs. There's a nuisance definition under the health code. Most of the time they deal with, you know, sort of public conduct or public health aspects of it. The common law aspects of nuisance usually arise in the context of, you know, competing interests among property owners. An example in New Hampshire, in this in the city is our noise ordinance. The noise ordinances arises under the context, idea of a nuisance, that you're causing a nuisance to somebody else. What I understand Attorney SBF's is doing is, trying to make the connection between the tower and sort of the common law definition of nuisance as an impact on somebody's private property. That appears to be what he's
Okay.
saying.
As I was saying, you already have some nuisance provisions in your code. In 17, chapter 17.2, the anti-nuisance standards for the city of Keene. There's one for erosion and drainage. That can be a nuisance. There's one for glare. Can you imagine that? Glare. And there's one for noise and vibrations. And there's one for noxious gases. So voltage and gases, I don't know, that's pretty close.
Madam Chair, if you
Yes.
don't mind,
Anyway,
Peter, I'm looking at the city code, and I don't see chapter 18.
17,
I'm sorry, 17, I was looking at 18.
17, yeah.
I don't see
Yeah,
it.
I got an old copy of it. Maybe you've updated and added some more.
Well, I don't see the chapter at all at this point. Let me,
Anyway,
you wanna take a
Anyone
look?
from,
the city was concerned about servicing the population with this protection. So that's what we're asking for. And we don't say, get out of business or anything like that. We're just saying, hey, find another place where you can put this thing safely and render us some peace and quiet. That's all we're asking for. If it doesn't happen, we're saying someday you're gonna have a collision there with that thing, and it's gonna be hell to pay for everybody in the neighborhood. And the neighborhood is largely homeowners type neighborhood. And it's that kind of a situation. You'd have every ambulance in Keene there trying to service these people. Now, I don't know, I talked to the fire department chief some time ago, and he doesn't have any control over that thing, turning it off. If that thing was ever hit, the company's gonna have to turn it off. Somebody's gonna have to notify them. How long it takes and all the gases and vibrations and everything else, the voltages that escape are gonna do a lot of damage. So we ask for your common sense. If you can't get them to do it outright, see if you can negotiate something. Just tell them that it's a bad location. Try to appeal to their common humanity.
all right.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. SBF. I believe we have the Public Works Director here to also speak to that street and the layout of that. We'd like to hear from the staff's perspective too.
Yeah.
But don't go too far because we might have some questions for you at some point.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for your time.
Do we have slides to go along with?
Computer, I'm not seeing it. Oh, there it is. Hit go down.
Different specialties.
Good evening, Madam Chair, committee members. Court Blomquist, Assistant City Manager, Public Works Director, Emergency Management Director for the city. And certainly the committee is certainly aware, but for the public, this particular facility is a small wireless facility. This is a recently new addition to items within the right-of-way. As the committee is aware, and the public may not be aware, small wireless facilities are controlled through the Federal Communications System. They issued a number of regulations, which in effect kind of restricted what communities could do in dealing with these particular types of structures. The city did adopt an ordinance dealing with the placement of these within the right-of-way. The placement within the right-of-way falls underneath the jurisdiction of the Public Works Department through the director. The way that this is structured, it's basically set up to deal with these as we would deal with any other utility structure, pole, et cetera, within the right-of-way. So when we went out and took a look, when the Tilson requested to go ahead and place a tower within this particular area, we did go out and begin taking a look to see where it could fit. What I just put a picture up there for the committee just from a reference standpoint. This is looking down at the corner of Summer Street and Middle Street. To your right, where you see the pole, that is the south side of Summer Street. To the left is the north side as you look towards Court Street. I think you will note that you will see, of course, going down Summer Street our utility, electrical utility, other telecom installations. You will notice on the pole that's about 50 feet down the road, there is a transformer on that pole. And then, of course, that is, as you can see, it's in a very narrow strip between the sidewalk and the street and the granite curbing. So again, I think you've heard us talk before about all the stuff that people look to place within the right-of-way and how we have to try to fit these particular everything in. Just a little background, this particular area was reconfigured in, I think, approximately 2008 when we had a large infrastructure project. One of the goals at that particular time was to look at some additional on-street parking in that area for the neighborhoods, businesses, et cetera. So at that time, Summer Street prior to that was two-way, meaning that you could travel in the east-west direction from Court Street to School Street to Court Street. The decision was made through the council that to provide the additional parking on-street, we would restrict it to a one-way direction. In this case, the one-way was looked at from a traffic standpoint, safety, et cetera, as being appropriate to go from the going from the west to the east or from School Street down to Court Street. This begins at the intersection of Middle Street. So up until that point, Summer Street is a two-way. You make the right-hand turn onto Middle Street, and then Middle Street is a two-way going down to Winter Street, which is one way at the other end going westbound. As you can see, part of the project was to create a bump-out area to basically provide that traffic calming and also to move the vehicles over to the left and to provide that lane of parking going down Summer Street. So when we're looking at a location to install this particular facility, looking down the street, it became apparent that this particular location would be the most appropriate from, again, a safety standpoint. Is if you look at where that telephone pole is, when we talk about what potentially could be hit, that has as high as chances being hit as this particular location, because that pole is right there adjacent to it. So we looking at all the various things, physicalness around the area. This seemed to make the most sense. As you can see, it is back away from the street. It is behind the curbing. So ideally, it should provide that protection for it. A couple comments were made about sort of the signage on the pole about electrical components. My background, going with a wastewater plant and other facilities, when you have electrical components, the OSHA requirements, et cetera, do require placing stickers, those things, to let the technicians know that they're going to be managing or dealing with electrical current within the pole. This is actually fed from the pole across the street. That's where it receives its electricity. I think if I remember correctly, that's where it receives its electricity from the grid in that area. So one of the questions was asked, well, what happens if this gets knocked over? It probably will go offline because the electrical feed probably will fail as a result of that. So there isn't a transformer or anything inside this particular structure. It's similar to other sort of other electrical gear that's located out within the right-of-way, which we have lots of come do that. So, and again, in my opinion, this was the best location to be able to locate this particular structure in this particular area and to make sure that it would be as safe as possible, because unfortunately, drivers, or vehicles, which are controlled by people, don't necessarily always follow the routes that they're supposed to do throughout the city, and they hit things they're not supposed to hit. But in general, this is the location where it should be minimized. somebody mentioned about plows. I will say to you right now, if one of my plow drivers were to hit that, I would be deeply concerned and probably sending that person off for a drug and alcohol test just to make sure, are we good? Because our plows can make around that particular corner they have for the longest time. So at this point, I can certainly answer any questions, but at the time, this seemed the most appropriate location.
Great. Counselor Giacomo? Start this way.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Do we have any accident data for that intersection?
I did not go pull any from the police department, and it would be, any accident that would exist would have been if it would have been reported, whether any kind of report was generated.
Okay, thank you.
Counselor Jones?
Thank you. Court, what's actually happening in this box? I'm assuming it's taken voltage from across the street, and it's a transformer. It's transforming it to what is needed for that cell tower. Is that what's happening in that box?
My understanding is that there are some small, I think some small step-down transformers, because I think that's a 208 transformer on the other side. There are some small transformers that would be dropping it down to the 110, 120 voltage.
In that box?
In that box, similar to what you would have in other electrical equipment in homes and businesses, et cetera, if they're stepping down the electricity. And then that power is used to power the computers, the chips and things that are within that control the.
Can that transformer, that box, whatever's doing, happen on the original pole and just send the voltage that's
Probably-
needed to the cell tower?
I would say probably not. I don't believe the utility company would allow that to happen. I mean, think of this as like your dryer at home. There's a circuit panel that takes care of that will drop it down from a 208. I do not believe that, again, you can put another set of, again, these would be very small over in another location. That's an attachment on the pole. They typically do not allow that. So all that equipment is inside that base.
Counselor Jones, I believe Counselor Giacomo might also have some information regarding that.
Yeah, if you will, thank you, Madam Chair. Yeah, it does the step-down function where it'll step down from whatever line voltage is. It's usually all single-phase inside those things, and it will then also transform into 48-volt DC usually. Usually the cells themselves tend to use DC voltage, so it'll also do that, and that aspect would not be able to be done on the main pole, even if the step-down could take place.
That's very helpful, thank you.
Anything further, Counselor? For right now? Okay. Counselor Ormerod?
Thank you. I have a couple of questions about each pole. So where does the electricity happen? Does it happen overhead? It's just not really shown in there. Is there wire that goes overhead, or does it go underground?
It's actually underground. On all these installations, we require them to install it underground.
Okay. All right, thank you. And so on the 5G pole, does that transformer have to be at ground level, or why can't they just put it up closer to where? I know you're not the designer, okay? But they should hear it,
Well,
okay?
I mean, again, I am not an electrical engineer. I'm a civil. I know enough electrical to be dangerous at times in doing it. Looking at their design that they provided as part of that, most all their equipment is at the base of the pole. And it's primarily, I believe, probably from being able to work on them safely, not have to have a bucket truck, et cetera. The tower or the antenna equipment is what's at the top. So you basically have all the electronics at the bottom, and then there's the wiring fiber optics that goes up to the antenna and capture it. Now, whether you can turn around and move all that to further up the pole, I can't say yes, I can't say no. I think from sort of also from our aesthetic standards that we're allowed to do, it starts getting into what would this again look like in configuration. Again, from a safety standpoint, again, this getting hit is no more dangerous than the pole down the street with that transformer on top of it.
Yeah, okay, thank you. I understand that, and I agree, and I believe that. The other poles that are on the street, though, looks like they've got transformers kind of halfway up or all the way up. They've got equipment up there. Do they have to have that same warning?
Well-
That OSHA warning at the base that, so you're walking down the street, every time you come to a pole, it says danger, you're gonna die? I mean, what?
You're now talking about different industries and different standards for different industries. So for example, just looking at that one pole there, that little green box, that's not a transformer, that's a telecommunication box. Basically, that's an old telephone box where they used to bring all the wires in and then tie them off and go out, so that's not a transformer. The utility companies have their standards that they're required to keep to. Since their facilities are located above a certain height, they don't have to put certain warnings out because, again, theoretically, only their staffs are occupying it. So again, what you start dealing with is you're starting to deal with different safety requirements for the different industries.
So I would just like to pick up here with a question. What is the ramifications of somebody striking this? Like, what's gonna happen?
Pole may fall down or partially break.
Is there a risk of an explosion as was?
In my opinion, there's no risk of, again, there's not a large transformer in here that would create a large explosion. You would probably have a larger pop bang from the transformer that's sitting on the pole just down the street.
Okay. So, I know there was some comments made by the petitioner asking, about like who is going to shut these things off. I am very aware, I've seen many winter storms where lines have come down and sat live on the ground for extended periods of time, and city staff sort of guards them or puts out cones and sort of protects them until the utility can shut them off. I'm sure this is similar.
It's a similar situation, theoretically. Again, if that were to come down, we would notify them, they would send out. Most likely what would happen is the Eversource would come out and cut the feed. If we were to ask them to do that, they would come out and cut the feed over at their pole.
Yeah.
So,
Okay. Do you have any other questions from the committee at this point? Councilor Giacomo?
Something else to consider here is that the actual bulk of the electronics being towards the base of the pole is actually a safer way of designing it as well, because if you do crash into it, the DC voltage is what is likely from that point all the way up to the top. So if that pole falls over and snaps off or something, you're not exposing the line voltage, unlike a telephone pole. If you hit a telephone pole, you're bringing down the high voltages coming down onto the street, whereas that wouldn't be the case with this one. So just, again, some other, they weren't designed in a vacuum. They're aware that these are going on streets, I would imagine.
And one other quick, just tune-up as well, because it's been a while since we've worked on this ordinance. But if I remember correctly, there is language in the ordinance in regards to these accessory units. And isn't there some recommendation that they be placed underground as well?
there is, again, depending on the type and the amount of equipment, there was some recommendations that certainly things could go underground, because there is a restriction for sizes of boxes and things on the sides of the pole. But again, in this place, their particular design met all the criteria, and having it sort of in this configuration gives it a better appearance than some of the other companies who put more, I'm gonna say more boxy cabinets on their poles.
So I would like to know that we've had some conversation about updating this ordinance at some point in the future, and maybe we could make a note as staff to consider, I know we've discussed a lot at council recently, having our utilities placed underground if at all possible. And I think that this would be another pertinent place to maybe pursue that. If it is not a water table situation or there aren't any other restrictions that would make it, I don't see why we couldn't potentially ask that that be the common practice. Councilor Giacomo?
I think the answer to that is maintenance. You need to be able to maintain these. That's why the warning is on the box. That's why the box is above ground level. Once you put it underground, you're talking about confined space permits. You're talking about a lot more. It's a lot more of an ordeal to get to actually work on it underground. That's the reason why it isn't done all that much. And also the fact you can basically put a foundation in, put a pole on it, and the only digging is really for the foundation, get access down to the power line that's coming down there. So I think that's that's why this is. I think updating the ordinance with little language every time that, you know, we don't like some small facet of this, I think is undermining what the ordinance is trying to do, which is help the overall aesthetics. And seeing some of the poles that are out there, I understand what Court is talking about here. There are some real ugly options for small cells out there. There's some real ugly options. This looks basically like a telephone pole with a little bit of fatness on the bottom, which is really relatively benign as far as streetscape goes, I feel. But so I certainly would not support any kind of change to that ordinance, because I think there are practical reasons why it's designed as it is, and it's for safety, it's for accessibility, and it, yeah.
Okay. Counselor Jones, did you have something to add as well?
Very similar what Counselor Giacomo had to say, only he's more of a detail guy than I am. But Court, our ordinance says you're the point man.
Correct.
So, is there anything we can do to give guidance towards what Kate was asking for?
I mean, I think in some ways right now, the ordinance does provide some of that, because again, it's back to, and there is a variety of what the equipment is, how much equipment is going to be placed. As I think as Counselor Giacomo indicated, again, I've seen some other proposals where, again, there was more equipment, which again, in more different boxes. So there was an interest of placing some of that equipment on the ground, so then you get kind of more of like what you see transformers that are on the ground out there, so you get more of these sort of things here. Those you could probably look to say, okay, maybe those would be more appropriate underground. But again, as you get underground, now you're talking about a much larger impact for the actual construction aspect. So that starts making other challenges.
But right now, that's your call, or do
Right
you
now,
need,
that's my call.
do you need guidance within an ordinance?
Right now, that's my call. Right now, I mean, again, I'm
And you understand
comfortable
what the
with the
people
guidance
want.
right now, with the guidances there, and I try to apply them the best that I can.
Good man, thank you.
Great. Anyone else? Okay, thank you. So at this point, I'm going to open it up for questions from the public. Is there anyone from the public who would like to speak? If so, please come to one of the microphones and state your name and address for the minute taker.
Make sure I don't run over this cord down here. Yes, I am Bradford Hutchinson, 305 Marlborough Street in Keene. And a few days ago, I saw Judge S. Beefs, as I know him, Attorney S. Beefs, Peter. I saw him walking and had a conversation with him, and he mentioned this device. I'd seen it while it was being built, and I had a chance to see the door off of it while they were installing it, see the delivery of it and the construction of it. And it's a very well-designed unit for what it is. So far, everybody's been talking about the physical device as a simple, inert, physical piece of infrastructure, as if it's just a telephone pole, fancy new telephone pole. Okay, fine, whatever. The issue of placement, is the car going to hit it? You know, parking, okay, fine, whatever. There's two things that I don't think Peter got to because of his age, partly, and I'm not insulting the gentleman. He was about to, what he was looking for at the end, before he got sidetracked and interrupted, was the city ordinance about what exactly is a nuisance. And this gets a little bit more to the conversation that he and I had. This is a 5G tower, and it's not a 1G or a 2G or a 3G or a 4G, it's a 5G. And 5G is very controversial for its health effects, public health effects. This is, I have to wonder are we avoiding the elephant in the room by talking about all this, what's basically irrelevant talk about a telephone pole, a new fancy telephone pole? This is a 4G phone. I don't know if it's 5G capable or not. But what Peter is reading about, that he didn't read, you saw him 50 years ago in college. They weren't studying the level of technology that we're at today. And this is the concern. I'm going to briefly mention technocracy and transhumanism. These are the twin threats that are facing the world, United States of America, New Hampshire, city of Keene, everybody in Keene. 5G, there's a lot of rumor, there's a lot of misinformation, disinformation going around about the potential of 5G. But considering the implications, I wish that I had made a photocopy of this a year or two ago when I was researching something else online. I found a patent application that was granted. The patent was granted to a medical device, to a pharmaceutical company, to accompany one of their new drugs. And I was interested in it from a technical standpoint, so I'm not going to try to remember the company or the drug or what it treated. It is basically the same thing as the COVID 1984 pandemic, scamdemic. It's very similar. The mRNA, modified ribonucleic acid, the Moderna, that's the company that Anthony Fauci has become a multimillionaire on in the last 3 years. They had to change the legal definition of vaccine. Otherwise, they would have had to call it experimental gene therapy. The patent for the device that I saw that accompanies a pharmaceutical drug operates at 5G wavelength. What it does, when the device is activated at a specific frequency and type and potency of energy, it basically can be used in a doctor's office, clinic. I don't know if they have a home model. Cheshire Medical Center may well have such a device. I understand they are using Abilify, which has RFID chips embedded in the capsule that transmit a short-range signal to a wearable device. In other words, you take the pill, and it's got a little radio signal in your stomach, and it transmits to a device you wear, and the doctor can remotely monitor it. And this is what we have right now. This is why they want 5G. But anyway, the device that I'm talking about, at a specific 5G frequency, I'm not saying all 5G frequencies. I don't know if it's a frequency this tower is capable of or not. We'd have to look at the FCC regs, and they get pretty technical, way over my head in terms of formal education. The device makes microscopic holes in cell walls, so the drug can enter the cell walls and do whatever it's supposed to do. In other words, the 5G device is specifically designed, when activated, to make microscopic holes in human tissue for the purpose of allowing the drug to flow into human tissue, to penetrate the brain-blood barrier, to introduce drugs into your cells directly through making microscopic holes in your cell walls. And if it can do that for a drug, it can do that for a toxin or a bacteria or a virus or other pathogen or a nanobot. That's what 5G is capable of doing. And there's nobody in this room, not even Court himself, that can answer this question technically. I know for a fact Court doesn't have the answer to this. I don't even know if he could look it up. He's going to have to show me the complete FCC tech specs, mil specs on this device, what it's capable of. That's the public health nuisance that Mr. Espes was trying to communicate before he was interrupted with, what is the statutory definition of a nuisance?
All right, thank you for your comments. Do you have anyone else who wishes to speak this evening? Okay, seeing none, I would bring it back to the committee to have a conversation about what we think we should be looking to do with Mr. SPF's letter. Does anyone want to get us started? Counselor Giacomo?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I think from what we've heard from the city, it sounds like this was well thought out, the placement. The installation was, there's no question with it. The hazard warning on it is very standard. Every circuit breaker that you'll ever go into has one of those on it, hopefully, and if it doesn't, it's out of code. So I don't see any reason that there would be a specific action. I would move to recommend the acceptance of this communication as informational.
Second.
I have a motion by Counselor Giacomo, a second by Counselor Jones. Any questions on the motion from the committee? Counselor Jones?
Yeah, I just want to say, first of all, I didn't interrupt and ask about the statute. I just said, where did the definition come from? Did it come from the state statute? That's all I want to know. And we found out it came from case law. And the other thing is, this continues to be an education process for us. I don't know a whole lot about electricity. I play with it sometimes, but Councilor Giacomo reminded us that it's DC going up to the tower, so it's not as dangerous as people think. DC automatically grounds itself because it's not a changing current. We will be working more on the ordinance, and I look forward to it. And Mr. SPF did bring up some good points, I think, that we ought to consider when we start working on this ordinance. And I thank you for bringing it forward.
Great, thank you. Anyone else? Anyone from the public have question on our motion? All right, seeing none, I would ask for a vote. All in favor? And that is unanimous. Moving on to our second item this evening is Attorney Michael Bentley for the Monadnock Tea Hanger Corporation's request to renew an existing lease. Do we have a Mr. Bentley here?
Madam Chairman, Madam Chairwoman, I'm sorry, members of the committee. Well, yes, I am a lawyer. I'm not here tonight as a lawyer. I'm here today as a hangar owner, one of the hangar owners at the Monadnock Tea Hanger Corporation at the airport. Reason we're here tonight is, as my letter indicates, we started off our lease arrangement with the city back on July 22 of 1988. The city granted to the Monadnock Tea Hanger Corporation a 20-year lease with an option to renew for an additional 20 years. I'm one of the original hangar owners. I bought my hangar in August of 1988. And if you would have asked me back then if I'd be sitting here tonight 35 years later with the request that I'm here about, I would have known what you were talking about. But fast forward, here we are. So today we're at year 35 of our total 40-year lease arrangement with the city. Our current lease does not contain an option to renew for any further period of time. So our lease expires 5 years down the road. And the specific request that we're making to the committee or to the city is that the city manager be authorized to grant us an option to renew for an additional 20 years. Some of my fellow hangar owners, as my letter indicates, would ask for 20 years plus an option to renew for another 20 years, for another total of 40 years. However the city wishes to view the subject, I guess it's up to the city. But our main concern is that in 5 years, if we don't have a further option to renew, we're done. The lease does not provide anything other than at the end of the lease term, we have to remove the building and restore the land to the way it was when the lease started, get rid of all the metal, dig up the concrete, plant grass, and give it back to the city. The problem that we have, practical matter, is this. If I want to sell my hangar today, all I can give to the buyer is my hangar and tell them that you can only be assured of being here for 5 more years, because if we don't get a new lease, your ability to stay here is going to be gone. So that affects the marketability of any of the hangars that are owned by any of my me and my fellow hangar owners, some of which are here tonight. We also have issues of maintenance. The doors are our responsibility to maintain. The roof is. We got to do what we have to do to keep it in good shape. The longer we go without knowing that we can stay there for a greater period of time, we're concerned that the issue of maintenance may tail off, and we don't think that's good for us. We don't think it's good for the building. We think we've been a very good tenant of the city. We haven't asked the city for anything. The city's been very good to us. They've plowed. We have no issue. We've paid our rent quarterly on the dime for the last 35 years. We're not asking for any cut in the rent. Our lease contains a CPI adjustment. The net effect of that is that we're currently paying more quarterly for rent than what the city is advertising to lease space to other people if they want to build a hangar. Again, we're not asking for any concession of anything other than we'd like to know that we can stay beyond the remaining term, and all we're literally asking is that the city manager be authorized to execute to us an option to renew on whatever terms may be in effect at the time that this current lease expires. We're not trying to lock the city into anything, 5 years down the road, other than give us the right to stay on the same terms and conditions that you'd be asking from any other person that would want to rent similar space at the airport.
Great. Well, thank you for clarifying all of that. I know I did read a lot of those concerns in your letter. City Manager?
Thank you. Monadnock Tea Hanger Corporation has been a great tenant, and we've had a very good relationship, and we would like to see that continue. Typically, these requests come to us, and then we do a lot of the work ahead of time and then bring them forward to you. We haven't had that opportunity yet to do that. One of the reasons this lease is expiring at the end of the 40 years is because FAA does not allow leases to extend beyond a 40-year period of time. They consider that as a disposal of property because it typically goes beyond the useful life of a piece of property. And so oftentimes in leases, there's a reversion clause. And in this lease, there's a clause to have the space cleared. But we do see the benefit in working with the Monadnock Tea Hanger Corporation in coming up with new terms. We don't typically grant early renewals. In fact, we have had requests in the past for an early renewal, and the difficulty with that has been not knowing what 5 years the requirements at the airport will be. But I think that we are creative in terms of how we can address that in lease language. And so I'm asking tonight that I be able to work with the Monadnock Tea Hanger group and negotiate an agreement and that I will bring forth in the future.
Okay, great. Do you have any questions? Councilor Ormerod?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I was thinking about the structure of this, and often, like in real estate, you can early terminate and then sign a new one immediately. Is that what we're thinking, or is it premature to discuss the options?
I do think it's premature to discuss the options, but I would like to talk through all of those options.
Okay.
Councilor Jones?
Thank you. Mr. Bentley, I think, first of all, this is a win-win situation for both sides. We want the business at the airport. We love the way that people are buying fuel at the airport. When people register planes, the city gets money at the airport. We want to see more hangars. So I can't see a negative side to this. And it sounds like you're not asking for any changes, but the city manager might be asking for some changes. Again, may I ask the city manager a question?
Absolutely.
Because I'm seeing in the recommended motion, authorizing you to negotiate and execute, usually,
No, and bring it back when ready.
and bring back when ready to execute.
Right.
Usually I want it that way, but
Yeah,
I'm
usually.
thinking maybe we can allow to execute unless you're gonna do major changes.
Yeah, no, usually we ask to negotiate and execute all at once, and I'm fine with that. But I did want to talk through, because I was unsure what exactly the T-Hanger group was looking for in terms of conditions, because we have to come up with some language that protects the city in the future, not knowing what the future actually looks like. And you know, in the letter, there was a request to reduce the rent, but we heard tonight that that is not actually being requested. That was one of the things I wanted to talk about. Typically, when we renew a lease, the lease amount continues to increase by the CPIU adjustment, which is the 3% annual. We don't typically go back. So when I put together the recommended motion, I wasn't sure if this was going to be a sticking point or not, and so that was one of the things, you know. Typically, like I said, I'm ready to negotiate and execute all in one motion because I have these conversations ahead of time, but this came in differently. This letter came in directly to the council instead of to the airport manager, and therefore it was directed to a council agenda.
And I would have to say, we probably don't have very many 20 to 40-year agreements. And so normally we're, you know, authorizing to negotiate and execute something that's going to be imminent to happen. This is something that I think it deserves a review after the fact. Counselor Giacomo, do you have anything to add? Oh, good. Okay. Do we have anyone from the public who'd like to speak about this? All right. Seeing none, I would ask for, come on forward. I know you told us once before, but just remind us your name and address, please.
I understand. Bradford Hutchinson, still live at 305 Marlboro, and I'll be brief. I've known Mr. Bentley for a long time. I go to the airport all the time. My understanding, I got a little bit of education tonight in various aspects of it, and that's a good thing. What I'm hearing as a member of the public is that they're asking the T-Hanger people, they are looking at their contract and saying, we'd like to make it just a little bit more sustainable. That seems very, very reasonable to me, and given that I don't know a whole lot about it, but being familiar with the airport and all of the people involved, I vote for, I think it's in the city's best long-term interest if we can help them make it a little more sustainable. So I want to support everything that Mr. Bentley just said, and the gentleman that keep them flying at the airport. Those are going to be important people to have an air show down there.
Great, thank you.
And it sounds like a very reasonable request to me, something that is in the city's win-win-win-win situation.
Yeah.
Thank you.
I tend to agree with that. All right, so with that, I would ask for a motion. Counselor Jones?
I would move to recommend the city manager be authorized to do all things necessary to negotiate these leases and bring them back when ready to execute.
Second.
Motion by Counselor Jones, second by Counselor Ormerod. Any questions on that motion? Anyone from the public have any questions on that? Seeing none, I would ask for a vote. All in favor? And that is unanimous. So that'll be going to the city manager. You guys can work out all the details, and we'll see it back. Thank you. Item 3 this evening, Ryan Grandmont's hawker and peddler request to place sandwich board on city sidewalk. I did hear from the clerk's office this afternoon that Mr. Grandmont is going to be unable to attend this evening. I would like to see this move forward. I know the season is short for outdoor sales, and I'd like to see if we can do anything to work through this, and I believe we have court here to speak to this.
Good evening, Madam Chairman, Committee, Corp. Blomquist, Assistant City Manager, Public Works Director, Emergency Management Director. You just basically said everything I was going to say. So
Sorry
we're
to steal
perfect.
your thunder.
No, I'm perfectly happy. People get tired of hearing from me at times. We do recommend that you move forward. You do have a motion in front of you. This is very similar to how we have treated the farmer's market.
Okay, great. And so, do we have any questions from the committee after reviewing the information we have in front of us? Is this something that you would work with the petitioner on
Correct.
finding a placement for?
Correct.
And that would be your office, Public Works?
Yes.
Okay. Counselor Jones? No? Okay. All right, do we have anyone from the public who would like to speak about this? This gentleman is looking to place a sandwich board to support his hot dog stand. Yes, welcome. Welcome back.
This is the agenda item that I came here tonight for.
Okay.
I just needed to practice with that airport. I had to practice being brief, brevity. And Mr. Estes and he didn't ask me to appear here, and he didn't go into any detail. When I talked with him, we had a more technical conversation. But this is the issue that I feel I want to address. As you all know, I'm on Main Street every day, often for hours of the day, different places and times, and I go here, go there. And there's some areas of concern that I try to keep in a special eye on, like the Common and the gazebo, which there have been at least 5 Keene Police Cruisers there today that I saw myself. And that was only in a relatively brief time. Railroad Square is another area of concern to the city because of the numbers of people that congregate there. I'd say on Main Street in Keene, it's Central Square, Common, and the gazebo, and Railroad Square, around Cumbies, end of Church Street, the rail trails, Ashwell at River Park. Those are areas where we can expect people hanging out who may be homeless, illegal drugs, drinking, public nuisances, public defecation, public urination, trashing, litter, things like that. These are areas all that I have keep my eye on to as much as possible. And I'm glad, we could easily have a much worse problem than we do, easily. And I think that's the result of an awful lot of people working very hard to have what we've got, especially the police, the fire, public works, Antonio and the other crew that's down on Main Street every day, literally picking up trash, picking up cigarette butts, picking up trash, keeping the downtown business district as beautiful as it is, and it's functional. And as you all know, the last 3 years have been hard on downtown. They've been hard on the economy. That was one of the many intended effects of rolling it out. And what I'm seeing is, during the week, on Main Street, way too many empty parking spaces on Main Street, and far too few people walking up and down the sidewalks for regular business. None of the downtown businesses are doing great. Well, some are doing better than others. They have their moments, weekends are decent with tourists. And so there's a lot of factors that are going into this thing at Railroad Square. And what I'm leading into is, I don't know exactly when I saw the hot dog cart appear on Railroad Square, but I kept an eye on it. As something that's happening in downtown Keene. Food trucks. We've got the one over on Emerald Street. There's one at the new Domino's Pizza, something taco truck out there. The issue with taco trucks, the committee and the full council have dealt with this in recent years, the food trucks issue. So it's an area of concern, and it's an area of interest, because these people want to have a successful business. It's in the city's best interest for them to have a successful business. And so I would say that this hot dog cart, the city has a vested interest in this gentleman's hot dog cart being a successful business for him, and a successful thing on Main Street in downtown Keene to attract shoppers, to attract other foot traffic, to be an amenity, to be something that Main Street offers. If people are wherever not in Keene and thinking, or they're in Keene, let's go downtown and let's have lunch. There's that hot dog cart. It's a nice day. We'll get a hot dog and sit out on the wall, the granite wall there at Railroad Square. which is not always as easy as we would like. It's sometimes occupied by non-paying customers. That's been a perennial situation. There's nothing we can do about that. It is what it is. But seeing the hot dog cart, I thought it worked very, very well. The individual, which I think Grandmont is his name. I don't have his name down.
That's accurate.
Yeah, I spoke with him last week at length. And I never talked to the guy directly. I mean, I know he's got all the city licenses and permits and everything, so I'm not worried about that. And he was doing a good business, and I saw nothing for me to be too concerned about, other than, hey, we got a hot dog cart on Main Street. I remember when, can't think of the guy's name, but he used to have a hot dog cart right in front of City Hall for a couple of years, a few years. Very popular. So, I'm glad to see a hot dog cart on Main Street for lunch. You know, not everybody, there's plenty of vegans and vegetarians and organic this, and that's what we got the co-op for. You know, for street fairs and festivals, the music festival, you know, I don't know that he was in the music festival, but that's the kind of thing that we want on Main Street. Well, recently, a couple of weeks ago, I noticed he's no longer at what I thought was an ideal location right at the sidewalk, tucked in against the lamp pole. It's kind of the way the bench seats, it kind of curves behind him. It almost is like a stall. The seating is still available to the public, and he would want to be out. It's not like he had the cart jammed right up against it so you couldn't get through. It's almost like the space was designed for his cart, is basically what I'm saying. And then a couple of weeks ago, I noticed he's down Railroad Street. And he's in, well, that's a loading zone. That's a pull-off. That's a special, like, that the city built that pull-in for big trucks that frequently deliver to Cherry Garden Restaurant. And so that delivery trucks can pull down there, pull off the street and not block the thruway because there's parking on the side of the street. And I thought, well, that's kind of funny why he's down there. And he was there a few days, and it came around time for me to actually buy a hot dog and go talk to the guy and meet him. And so that's what I did. It was about 2 o'clock in the afternoon. The lunch rush was over. You know, I'm certainly not going to go try to have a conversation with him at noon or 12:30 during the lunch rush. When there's customers going to be coming up. So I wanted to be able to introduce myself, listen to what he had to say. And overall, I was not too dismayed. But he told me he had been basically ordered to move. And the concerning is, I'm going to be a little bit careful with what I'm saying, but I know my facts. And so I want to stick to the facts and not be judgmental or say something that I don't know about, because I realize that it's not. But apparently John Rogers and Andy Bohannon were involved. And Andy Bohannon, Parks, Rec, and Cemeteries, is that Railroad Square is a park? A rec? You know, I didn't know that.
It is a park.
But Mr. Grandmont,
City attorney.
To clarify that, it has not been defined as a park. We're still working on the definitional aspects of
It
Railroad
does
Square
have
and Central
some
Square.
unique
Yes.
characteristics that preclude it from being a town square,
Yes, exactly.
but not maybe necessarily a park.
Right.
yeah, my understanding is that the common is the common and has specific designation and definition of a commons. And, for example, is used for political events, or there was a candlelight vigil for overdose awareness last week. That there are certain events that the city recognizes that as a commons where events happen. My understanding is that Railroad Square was basically the same.
So I will let the city attorney make sure that I'm not going to misspeak here, but
Yeah.
there was a period of time where this land was gifted to the city, or city manager, do you want to explain it? You might be better. The pavers. So the problem with how we speak about this area is that the area that has been paved with those red brick pavers, that area came to the city with stipulations as a gift. And it delineates what we can and cannot do with that area that is different than other city assets, like the
And this
common.
is down on paper somewhere, right?
So
Where,
he-
was this the city clerk's office?
He was on the paver area and was asked to relocate to a space that we designate, which you did correctly indicate can be used as a loading area, but also is where the city has a vendor. So if you were to need to sell wares,
I'm trying to be careful in what I'm saying, because
No,
I
and
don't
so am I,
want
because
to
I-
inadvertently say the wrong thing, or,
And I don't want to misspeak also, so I keep looking to staff to make sure I'm not getting out of line, but
Yeah.
I know that there are rules about the pavered area that do not allow the city to allow commerce to happen on that space. So we have run into conflicts in the past when we have different events, that there are specific types of things that can happen.
Wizarding Week.
I'm sorry?
Wizarding Week. There was commerce occurring on the pavers Wizarding Week.
So I think that there are festival permits that we can outline a footprint, and for a period of time during a closure, we can have control over that space. But in a general practice, we couldn't have the farmer's market be located there, or have, an ongoing craft fair located there. And I do believe there might be some delineation between if the sales were for a profitable or for a nonprofit. There are some there. So I have not read this specific contract myself. I'm going off from things that I've learned over time through speaking with the attorney, but I think that might have had something to do with the relocation. And I do think that the staff supports whatever we can do for Mr. Grandmont to help encourage business and people to see him in the location where he is, because you're absolutely correct. I think that having any sort of resource that attracts people to our downtown is a benefit.
Yeah, I'll get that train of thought back on track in a minute.
Sorry.
The other thing that, I'm not here representing Mr. Grandmont, so I want to be careful what I'm saying. I have my own concerns about the issue. Excuse me. And what I was seeing, I was concerned that the city, let me just say the city or City Hall, not trying to name names or point fingers, that's not my intention. Based on what Mr. Grandmont was telling me, I felt like Mr. Grandmont was not as satisfied with the city as I would like to have seen him be. I'd like to see the city work a little more cooperatively with people. I didn't realize the complexities of the situation, and I don't think Mr. Grandmont did either. I think maybe it wasn't handled as well as it could have been. And I'm surprised that he's not here tonight. I hope that he's okay, there's no further problems. And he did express, it's coming to the end of the season. This is not going to be relevant in a few short months. It's
And-
not going to be an issue, but I'd like to see it extend as long as possible, as successfully as possible for everybody. And I saw some complications with that, and I don't, I'm looking at the time, I feel like I've said all I need to say
Okay.
on the issue, and I kind of want to wrap it up and
Well,
keep
and-
my mouth shut for the fourth agenda item.
Well, thank you for your comments. And I will say, just to follow up, when I saw that he was not going to be able to attend this evening, I was very aware that the selling season for him is short. And we do have a very extended meeting period for PLD and MSFI meetings. They are once a month. So for him to not have his item heard, it's very unusual to not have the petitioner to speak to their item. But I wanted to make sure, I had a feeling that there would be hopefully a positive outcome for him here. and that I wanted to see that happen as expeditiously as possible so that it can get to council and we
Yeah,
can
and
get-
I want to make sure too, Kate, that, or Counselor Bosley, I'm sorry.
That's fine.
Counselor Bosley, Kate, I want to make sure, as far as I know, he can stop into Patty Little's office and get a list of counselors and find out what his ward counselor is and the at-large counselors, and he can contact them directly and maybe answer all these questions ahead of time, so the next time he comes here, it's just
Absolutely.
something like that.
And he doesn't need to just preclude himself from speaking to counselors that are ward representatives that are not in his ward. We'll all answer questions.
Yeah, I'm looking at a Main Street, like, for instance, he didn't know that John Rogers' wife Judy owns Primrose Coffee, another downtown business. I know the downtown business owners don't always get along as well as we would like them to. We all have a similar interest downtown for downtown business and property owners. And, my primary concern is doing everything I can to support and promote the downtown businesses so downtown runs as well as possible for everybody.
Well, thank you.
That's my concern.
Great.
Is making sure downtown Keene runs the way we want it to. Go ahead, Elizabeth.
Okay.
And I'm done. That's it. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, city
I
manager.
just want to clarify just a couple of things, and great job explaining the pavers, because that's a hard thing to explain. Mr. Grandma applied for a vending permit for a space he could not fit in. And we did not realize that. So he applied for his permit, he got it, and he set up his cart, and it was well beyond the vending space limits, and the restrictions related to the pavers came into play. So instead of simply revoking his permit and not allowing him to vend, we worked with him to find a compromise, and the compromise is the location that he's currently at. Now, it's not his prime location as he had hoped for before, which is why we are in support of his request for a sandwich board sign.
Great, and thank you for the clarification. So, I guess at this point, I am comfortable with this. Does anyone want to present us with a motion? Or Counselor Jones, do you have a comment?
No, I just want to say, I chaired the MSFI committee in 2000 when at that time, we created 8 spaces downtown for vendors to use. Due to a lack of usage, we then, a couple of years later, we changed it to 5. This gentleman, there still are some empty spaces that he has the right to request to go to if he wants to. That place where he is right now was originally a created space for vendors. But all of this is getting off point. He's just asking for a sandwich board.
Right, exactly, yes.
And so he has the right to ask for another space. He's not asking for that. He's asking for a sandwich board. And
Correct.
we should stay on point.
Great. Thank you, Counselor. Any other comments? All right, I think I'm ready for a motion.
On behalf of the Planning, Licensing, and Development Committee, I move to recommend that the current license issued to Ryan Grandmont for use of the vendor cutout adjacent to Railroad Square be amended to allow a placement of a sandwich board sign on the city property, which may be erected prior to the start of sales each day, subject to review and approval by city staff, and with respect to the specific location. The sign must be removed immediately after sales have concluded.
Second?
Motion by Counselor Ormerod, second by Counselor Giacomo. Any questions on that motion? Anyone from the public? Seeing none, I would ask for a vote. All in favor? And that is unanimous. Last item is Roger Weinrich's request to use city property for a block party. Do we have Mr. Weinrich? Come on up.
Hi, everybody. Roger Weinreich, 110 Main Street in Keene. So the request is pretty straightforward. We've had a couple of block parties years ago before the pandemic, and it involves basically closing off the section of Main Street directly in front of our block, routing traffic around Eagle Court to Cypress, and the other end of the close is up by Modest Man, and then we would have games and activities for mostly children, but adults to do also. So the thought was to coincide it with the Pumpkin Fest, and part of the reason is with the closures up at this end of Main Street, some of the folks at the other end say, oh, we ought to get traffic down that way, so we thought it would generally help some of the businesses down south a bit there. That's about it. It would coincide with Pumpkin Fest. It would begin at 2 p.m., and then when Pumpkin Fest is over, we've chatted up with the Pumpkin Fest folks. They like the idea of it. What's just up in the air slightly on our side, assuming it works out for the city and going through protocol with Public Works and PD, et cetera, is the cost of it. The two we did years ago, both were sort of dramatically different in the cost. Both of them involved putting the Jersey barriers at the ends of the street, but also down the meridian or the median strip. And in both cases, since there wasn't a community event going on, we had to hire 2 police officers and also have Hunter North at the front of the obstacle or obstruction, just directing traffic. But the price varied considerably. So we're just also wanting to see what it's going to look like for the cost. And this was years ago, so one year it was $5,000, the next year it was $3,000, so it does vary. So we first want to see if it makes sense for us to invest in it, to pull it off. And behind it all is just the concept of maybe having a closure down at that end of the street set up with, pylons that come up out of the ground, so it can be something to also balance out the closure at the other end of the street and drive foot traffic back and forth instead of just at one end.
Okay.
Yep.
I think we have Court here also
Okay.
to speak to this as well.
Hey, I know you.
Good evening again, Corporal Lundquist, Public Works Director, Emergency Management Director. Yes, as I think Roger's indicated, there have been some previous events that were down a number of years ago. Staff would like to have a protocol meeting just to flesh out what we're looking at doing. We also need to answer, as you heard, some different questions since I have community events going on. How does the interaction of detours, costs for detours, et cetera, going to go off? So what we're recommending this evening is for you to place this on more time. As the chair mentioned earlier, you all have a schedule that's once a month. There is a concern that, of course, this is October 21st. Theoretically, right now, if we were just to keep to your normal schedule, it would not come back until the 3rd week of October, and then the council would not approve it until the 4th week, which is 3 days before this event would occur. Keeping them respectful for the requester, what we're going to be recommending, or this is sort of the plan that staff has been putting together. What we will do is that after we have our protocol meetings, depending on how quickly we can get things done, what we would be doing is requesting the mayor to call this from your committee at full council. So that could be as early as the 21st of September, or on October 5th, your first meeting, to do that, and then have the council act on this request at that particular time.
Okay, that's great. And will Mr. Reinrich be able to get the financial information from you?
We should be able to provide as much information as we could for, again, a normal protocol.
Okay,
That's why I'm kind of indicating it may most likely be at the October 5th meeting, depending on how long it takes to process, and then for Roger to review and get back.
okay. Counselor Giacomo?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Yeah, the only thing I was curious about, and I'm sure this will come up in protocol, is it is leaving a weird 150-foot section of Main Street open in the northbound. And
Yeah.
it's just something I'd love to see brought up. I'll probably be at that protocol. But it's just something interesting. Maybe we take a look at that and see, is it actually more cost-effective to just close that section as well and save a set of barricades, or what? I don't know the answer
Yeah,
to
that's,
that,
I mean,
but
that's
something
part
to
of
think
the,
about.
that's part of the question. That was one of the things that sort of jumped up for myself, and I think, and again, Shane Maxfield was. There's also a physical question, because right now, for the Pumpkin Fest, what we're doing is we're detouring the northbound to either onto Railroad Street or across to Gilboa Avenue to do that sort of cut, to move them through that cut-through. So if somebody's coming north, they want to go to the east side, they could go up and just make the right turn onto Railroad Street. If they're coming north and they are heading out toward, they want to head towards the west, we did this last time for the Pumpkin Fest. We kind of configured it so that the vehicles could go across the opening there onto Gilboa Avenue and progress out. You're right, if we push traffic over Cypress Street, they have to make the left I'm just not sure if there's the weave movement for people to move around. It may end up being, as we've done for other events, we would do the full detour at Main and Emerald, and then allow still people to use Cypress or Eagle over to Cypress, but they would have to come back out the Eagle way versus going down Cypress and getting out that way. So that's part of the sort of the kind of the discussions to kind of figure out how to
Yeah, I apologize.
fit all these puzzle pieces together.
When Roger and I had spoken, I was thinking, I forgot about the Cypress to Railroad, forgot the Cypress to Railroad block there would not be included, and realizing, oh boy, it's 160 feet, I think I measured it on the
Like
GIS
that, yeah.
system.
It's just
And so
the weaves.
It's a lot of weaving, so.
But that's something
in
we have to
general,
look
I
at.
feel like I've had messages to me from other southern end of the downtown Main Street section come to me and asks, hey, so what's happening down on our end?
Mm-hmm.
And I said, well, Roger's looking into a block party, but other than that, trick or treating. And so I think there certainly is interest in some of the businesses down there to do something like this, and it'll go. I'm sure the Pumpkin Fest board will have a conversation about it as well.
Yeah, on the outset, it feels complimentary, so it'll be interesting to see how the protocol goes, and we'll be looking to hear back from you.
We will let you know.
Great. All right. Yes.
And just as the requester too, this is kind of late for us to come in, like the other block parties, we were a little more timely. This just kind of got dreamt up recently, and so if it doesn't work out and this just becomes a discussion or dialogue about how to do future closures for things, that'll be great too. Then we'll know a little better how we pull off the tandem type of thing.
Yeah,
So, okay, thanks, guys.
great. I appreciate it. All right, so with that being said, is there anyone from the public who needs to comment on this? Mr. Hutchins?
I'm not going to sit down this time. I'm going to stand up. Yeah, I'm still Bradford Hutchinson. And I clearly remember the two previous block parties that I believe Mr. Reinberg called them. And I clearly remember having a long conversation with Lieutenant Maxfield, who was down there as working. And he shared with me of the security, and I observed how this blocking worked and the traffic flow, the flow of cars, and the relative problems. And the two previous ones, they were different in how they were set up exactly. One had a little more infrastructure and city involvement than the other one. But from an overall perspective, they both ran excellently. It's an excellent idea. It works very well. And I want to speak strongly in favor of it. And that I would like to say, I recall it working very, very, very well. And I would like to see in the same spirit, again, I want to promote this and put my weight behind it, if that's worth anything.
Okay,
I
great.
think, I'd like to see it happen.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Anyone else? All right, seeing none, I would ask for a motion.
I'll move to recommend the request to use city property for the block party be put on more time to allow for protocols to be scheduled.
Second?
Motion by Counselor Giacomo, second by Counselor Jones. Any questions on that motion? Seeing none, I would ask for a vote. All in favor? And that is unanimous. You won't be hearing back on that item most likely here at this committee. That will go directly to council after protocols are held. And I appreciate you bringing it forward. Always happy to try to help get something happening downtown from the council perspective. So with that being said, I will adjourn this meeting and thank you everyone